The level of pretentiousness involved in naming the tomato sauce that I just had on my very good falafel spicy tomato sauce cannot be overstated. And I understand that my taste buds are spoiled after living in New Mexico, where the green chilies from Hatch were stuff of legend. Living in Bangkok, Thailand, where the spicy fish soup could tear your face open and just leave you crying in a corner. Still, if that's the worst thing that happens to me today in Sao Paulo, Brazil, it's a good day. It's a good weekend. I hope your weekend went well too. And what I want to bring to you, what you read, is about Brazil and the danger versus here where you are, even though where you are doesn't really matter that much. After 5 continents and 15 countries, I have never had more people tell me to be careful than when I told them I was moving to Brazil. These are mostly the same people who warned me not to drink the water when I moved to university at Las Cruces, New Mexico. And New Mexico is in the United States. For people outside the United States, for people in the United States, Las Cruces, New Mexico is in the United States, and I was being warned, hey, don't drink the water. This is the level of quality, the information most people have about their own country, much less the rest of the world, when they say, don't go to Brazil. What I want to warn you about is that it's just as violent where you live. If you live in any other major cities of the world, that's New York, London, Hong Kong, Shanghai, Sydney, all of them. However, it always depends on where you live in that city. I've noticed, particularly among a lot of expats and expat families, they have this notion that there are places in the world that are dangerous everywhere, all the time, period, by definition of being in that country. A few days ago, I had a conversation with Greg, Mr. Flip Flop. I believe it's Mr. Flip Flop's fried chicken, buffalo wings in the Dominican Republic. I'll leave a link to that at the bottom as well. I hope you guys get to go to the DR, as they call it, to check him out. They refer to that place with such fondness that we had a good time talking. Hopefully next time we can talk about more than how coming to the Dominican Republic is the stuff of legend like Brazil, where you go there, you just die. I'm going to try to give you the Brazilian perspective, not as a native Brazilian, but as someone who is becoming, let's say, more Brazilian, having lived here for several years and have the privilege of knowing what to expect, and still being able to give a balanced assessment of what the threat level is actually like. When people say Brazil is dangerous, that's like saying New York is dangerous. I was born in Niagara Falls, New York, not New York City. One of those cities is more dangerous than the other one, yet they're both in New York State. If you're from another country, you'd think my tiny hometown had a homicide around every corner every day. Because when they say New York is dangerous, well, danger is relative. I read that when you go to Brazil, you'll be shot and stabbed right after they got to your luggage at the airport, because that's the story that they sold you. That when you go see the real Brazil, and I say that dripping with sarcasm, because what most people mean when, particularly Americans, they say the real Brazil, it's classist. Because what they want to do is go someplace where there are a lot of poor people to feel self-righteous by living among them. I didn't grow up in poverty. I didn't grow up rich, but I didn't grow up in a housing project. And that's relevant to the story, not I'm better than you or worse than you statement. It's not an ugly dog contest. We're not here to see who had it worse. But a lot of people feel self-righteous and believe they're seeing the real Brazil if they go to these really poor places and live there. You know, I don't know how to look for gangs and gang affiliations. I couldn't tell you if somebody was carrying a gun or not. I didn't grow up that way. And I have friends born into much higher class stations than I did who moved to Brazil, and in order to live in a place where people are shot by the police for no reason, kind of like certain places in America. As in any big city in America, Brazil has certain areas where if you live there, the odds are you're going to be living in danger because poverty breeds violence. We don't have to like it. We don't have to talk about it. We can even pretend like that's not true, but I hope in the comments you correct me if I'm wrong. But if you're living in an area where there's a lot of economic turmoil and economic depression, whether it's the people's fault who live there or not, if you have a lot of unrest, you have a real problem on your hands. Unfortunately, a lot of people want to equate that to the entirety of the city. I live in a neighborhood called Bashiga. It's near a neighborhood named Bella Vista. It's not a rich neighborhood, but I walk down the street talking on my cell phone with people pushing baby carriages. It's a regular neighborhood, like any working class but dignified neighborhood. The trick is that my neighborhood exists in the United States. My neighborhood exists in different African countries. My neighborhood exists in the UK. Different languages, same people. Interestingly enough, in Brazil, your middle class income can give you some protection if you're black, whereas in America, being black means that's all you are. And this isn't true 100% of the time, all the time. I invite my dear friend Dave, who you've seen on other shows, other YouTube chats that I've had, to come in on that as well. Economic stability as a black person can afford you certain protections. Being black first here may not be enough for the police to be aggressive, because if you're in a certain neighborhood and dress like you belong there, and this is classist what I'm saying, as unfair as it is, you stand a good chance of being someone who has options and who should be left in peace. Have you or anybody you know gone through this realization in any other places? Let me know again in the comments. Has anyone here understood that when they hear someone say, or hear me say, I don't want to go to that neighborhood is known to be a bad one. How do you live there? Why don't you do your social justice work in another way, and instead of coming to a bad neighborhood, making a video about how terrible the neighborhood is, complaining about it, then convincing the rest of the world that Brazil is a shanty town, and you are this noble person living in the shanty town. Side note, the poorest areas in Brazil are called favelas. We don't have an equivalent to that in the United States. We have housing projects. One step below that is called a shanty town. Again, I'm giving you a rough approximation, but we don't have an equivalent to that level of social. We don't have in the United States anything close to that level of often depraved and ignored neighborhood. The difference is this: when you have a foreigner comes to the United States, do they move to the most poverty-stricken neighborhood they can find? No. They don't say, wow, America's terrible. I'm going to go live in the deepest, darkest, poorest trailer park or housing project and say America's terrible. No. Foreigners go, when they come to the United States, to the safest, most middle-class neighborhood or upscale neighborhood that they can afford, and then talk about how brilliant America is to the rest of the world, because most of the country is actually pretty nice. I know I'm just jumping off a cliff here on this one. What I'm saying applies in a lot of places. If you have questions about Brazil or any place I've lived, I'm happy to answer those. And if you've been in Brazil before, you can always find me in Brazil now. Or if you're coming to Brazil, let me know. I run the Facebook group Black Expats in Brazil. Let me know if you're in Brazil or you're coming to Brazil. We can work out a hello for you. This is the part where I talk about what I do in Brazil that helps to keep me in a social station a lot closer to the one I lived in the United States and other countries. And it is a self-promotion, because you will notice I'm not doing any of the YouTube ads or any of that nonsense. I'm an editor, a copy editor, proofreader, proofwriter. If you write books, magazines, web pages, and you need your English to be done in grammatically correct university-level English, I do everything from that to coaching people who do TED Talks and speak at universities. If it has to do with the English language, even if the first language isn't English, you've got my email address. You can look down in the comments, click the show more. I'd love to have your business. Stay with me. I had to get that in. Stay with me, because I'm gonna lose you here. I know I'm gonna lose you. If I lose you, I'm okay with that. Just hear me out to the end before you decide to delete my name from your phone, because I'm about to play the race card. Long before President Donald Trump effectively rebranded the phrase fake news, which was older than him, I knew most news was fake. As a black American, I understood that the television shows I watched, the news that came on every channel, every newspaper and magazine article written about me, for the most part, was going to paint a picture of a malicious, lazy, white woman raping monstrosity that even as a child had the strength of 10 grown men and could only be dealt with through extra violent means. I learned to be skeptical and suspicious of all information, all the time, period. I was taught by black Americans older than I was that none of the things they said about me on television was true. And when I became a man who chose to see the world, I understood that if I can't trust any news outlet, going all the way back to the halcyon days of what some people call the golden age of news, newsflash, unless you're a white American, there was no golden age of news about you. That means if you're an immigrant, Native American, First People, Black, the news was never a good idea. Even if at that point in history, I knew the media couldn't be trusted, to be honest about black Americans who can actually raise an alarm about what was being said about them, why would I listen to the media about what they said about people in another country, especially if that country was full of brown people or black people, like Africa, Haiti, my new home in Sao Paulo, Brazil? Let this sit with you, but I want to hear your first, what do they call it? What do the kids call it now? I want to hear your first take. I want to hear what you think about what I just said. Leave a question, comment in the comment section. That sounded weird. But I needed to get this out there because just like you got Mr. Flip-Flop Greg running his sports bar in the Dominican Republic, doing the yeoman's work of re-educating people to not listen to everything you see on television. Talk to people who live there. Now, I'm not telling you that I'm 100% right about everything all the time. I'm right most of the time. I'm right so often that my friends never bet against me. However, if I'm wrong, I want you to prove me wrong because you went out there, you talked to somebody who's on the ground, and you found out the truth. Click the show more button. I'm not about to have a migraine over this. I love you all. Goodbye.